Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the India-Israel Industrial and Technological Innovation Conclave, or I4F, as it's popularly known. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us and our esteemed panel as well.
So idea is to leverage complementary strength of each other and explore not only India and Israel, but also global market.
We are in an age where disruption is the norm. Technology disruption is the norm. And we are seeing every industry being transformed because of these technology disruptions.
What I called, we went from 0 to 1 in about 4 years. Now we have to go from 1 to 100. And if it will take us 4 years for each digit, it may not be in our lifetime.
There are many similarities that make us compatible rather than competitive, and thus make the growing partnership a mutual necessity and mutually beneficial.
Dr. Mira, we have been talking about this, how India can learn from Israel's example. Israel's population is much smaller compared to India, so we really have to see what works in the Indian context. But how can this relationship be mutually beneficial as you see it?
I think that, as I said earlier, there is a need for a very fast movement now because technology is changing so fast on every aspect of your life, of our life. And problems that already been solved, there is no point to start reinvent the wheel. Turning a desert into a farm, it's something that Israel has been doing in the past 70 years and maybe 100 years. So to turn some technology, innovation out of the box that was piloted in Israel by the 8 million people now have to move into mass production in India in a much, much larger area. On one hand, much larger population and area, but on the other hand, on a very, very small individual farmer that operating as individual farmer on a very different way than the kibbutz or the organization in Israel. So there is multiple adoption that need to be done in order to adopt what was done in one country and what will be done in another country. And I talked before about the cultural differences. So different people working in different way, and the technology have to be adjusted. And that, I think, what we can learn to take what I call the skeleton, the innovation that was already done, and now to address it and put a different style to this to address the issues here. That's on one end. On the other end, we have another issue that Israel, as you all know, lives in a very friendly neighborhood, right, to say the least. So that necessity creates a lot of out-of-the-box thinking to stay ahead of the curve continuously. And from that, the whole cyber technology has emerged for the defense side. But now it's being turned in Israel into the commercial side, into the internet, that we all suffer from the same problem worldwide. So take that already notion of how to build a whole cyber security for the commercial market. It's for the banking industry, for the healthcare. We just heard that some healthcare system, without mentioning them, have been breached. If you just think about the neighborhood we live, you can think how many people would try to breach Israel Utilities Company. And no one of you heard ever that anyone succeeded. And it's not coincidence. So those ingredients that we already established in Israel can be now work together here. And the most important is for the benefits, the mutual benefits of the two countries. In business, it's only win-win. There is no one win, one lose. Win-win, and that's what I think Israel, the Prime Minister of Israel, the Ambassador, the State of Israel, people of Israel, and people of India are expecting from us. Win-win situation.
You have announced these results of the companies that will be collaborating in R&D with Israeli companies. Any early harvest areas that you'd like to tell our audience about?
No, in fact, yesterday in the board meeting we had a deliberation that should we open up to all possible area or remain focused. Because we expect a lot of proposals from the Indian company being the market size so big. On the other hand, reservation from the Israeli side was that being a small country, there are not many companies. So we should remain focused to given sectors. So we have decided to continue with the 4 areas: agriculture, information and communication technologies, water and energy for the next call.
Very interesting. So 4 areas that have been clearly laid down: water, agriculture, IT and communication.
ICT is one.
ICT is one.
Yeah. And energy, ICT, water and agriculture.
Water and agriculture. All right. Professor Ashutosh, if I can get you in over here, if we talk about commonalities and problems, Israel has been dealing with the water crisis. They may be staring at a drought this year. Ambassador Carmen can probably correct me if I'm wrong. But if you look at the scenario in India, we have so many states grappling with the drought situation. We're a monsoon-dependent country when it comes to our agriculture. Do you think this is a relationship that we can utilize for our benefit, especially when it comes to drinking water needs and agricultural needs of India?
Obvious answer to your question is yes. We can use this partnership to learn more about the use of water. You see, water is a complex, multi-dimensional problem. It's not just about purifying water, which is certainly one aspect. It's about conserving water, and of course, about 70% of water in India is used for agriculture. So there's a huge nexus between agriculture and water. If we can even make that usage 10% more efficient, then you can imagine the amount of water which becomes available for other uses. So it's, you rightly said that it's dependent on monsoon, but it ought not to be dependent on monsoon. It should be something related to conserving and harvesting water, right? So this is another dimension of water problem, which is not just related, like I said, purification, but we have to look at conserving water in all applications, including agriculture, which is the major application. But also harvesting water and just making a judicious use of it. For example, in Israel, there would be 2 or 3 different pipelines. One supply different quality water. You don't need same quality water that you need for drinking for agriculture, right? So there's no point actually purifying water on large scale for all applications. So there are many, many lessons that certainly one can learn about water from Israel because well, I mean, they've had this problem for a long time. We are going to be having this problem more and more in the years to come. It's time to wake up, right. And it's time to do things. For example, revive our springs in Himalayas, take care of ponds and lakes and so on. So very multi-dimensional problem. It's also cultural.
Also develop non-conventional sources to conserve water.
Yeah. I'll give you another dimension to this problem. So we talked about nexus between agriculture and water.
Right.
You see, there are certain crops, like for example, cotton. To grow 1 kg of cotton, it takes 10,000 liters of water. It is something that most people don't realize. Of course, to grow rice, for example, and so on. Now, if you grow these crops in the areas where there is no water, then you're dependent on groundwater supply, and that's going to get depleted, right, at this rate. Right. You know, so a whole lot of my friends think that cotton actually is environmentally friendly option, which it is, except that when you factor in the water which is to be used for it,
right.
it loses some of its sheen. And certainly when you're exporting a kg of cotton, you're also exporting virtually 10,000 liters of water with it.
I'd like to get in Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, cybersecurity. You know, Dr. Amiram, when he was here, he was talking about cybersecurity and the reason why Israel has worked so much on it. You know, all our security experts have always said that today the greatest threat is probably not from conventional terrorism, but from cyber terrorism. Would you urge Indian companies to look at collaborations and R&D with Israeli companies in the field of cybersecurity?
Yes, clearly, and we need to leverage solutions that exist, but we also, I believe, need to invent new solutions, because our life is more and more digital. Everything that we do today generates data, and this data is being stored forever. This data never dies, actually. It doesn't disappear, so it's there forever. And so we are leaving these digital trails all over the place. We do not know who has them, where they are, and what purpose it's being used. So on one end is the cyber terrorism. The second is the crime that's happening using this digital data. But there is also commercial exploitation of this data, which requires us to come up with new policies around these things. Now, in the Indian context, this gets complicated because we still have a large population that's uneducated, illiterate. And so how do you explain to the people that their data must be protected and they need to do certain things, with understanding of what the data will be used for? So the complication increases because now you have a consumer who actually does not understand the implications. And we need to then, through regulations, I believe, through business models, protect this data for our citizens. So this is an opportunity, and this is why I said we need to think about 21st century solutions. So we need to think about solutions that will, of course, take care of the problem, but also understand the unique opportunity that we have in coming up with new business models and new policies, new regulations around, so in this case, data.
Right.
And make sure that, and this can actually become a template for all developing countries. I also believe that this can become a template for all countries, because this problem is, even though, made larger because of the diversity of population that we have, is the same for Israel or same for US or same for China. And so we could actually lead the world in coming up with the policies that are necessary in the 21st century. One last point, this data does not understand or respect national boundaries. Right. So this data flows across national boundaries and could be anywhere in the world. So that's something, again, I believe we need to address, because what is the purpose of a sovereign country when it comes to, or what are the rights of a sovereign country when it comes to data about its citizens? I think that's something we need to address. Again, I believe India can lead the world, and Israel has the same issue and same problem. We could work together on this.
Yeah, but I think that a very important point that you made, sir, we need to find local solutions. You can study the Israeli example, you can collaborate with them, but when it comes to something like data protection, we need to have a very strong own regulations.
Yes, and that's because of the unique circumstances that we have, of the diversity of population in terms of languages, in terms of culture, in terms of literacy and things like that.
All right. Mr. Varshney, if I can get you in over here, I think that is going to be the crux of this relationship. Whatever we are learning from Israel, how do you develop it at a macro level? I think this will be the big challenge for all the companies going ahead. Because the Israeli context and the Indian context is different.
Yeah. So when we are talking about co-development, obviously we are taking into cognizance the requirement of our own country. So when we are expecting these companies to come up with the project proposals, so key thing what we are going to look at it is how it is going to influence Indian society, Indian market in particular. So if they are developing products which are of direct relevance to our society at large, that is going to be our priority.
Endeavor. Yeah. Professor Ashutosh, if I could ask you about the energy sector. We're collaborating in the energy sector also, as Mr. Varshney said. There has been a lot of focus of the Narendra Modi government on clean energy. We have a climate change obligations as well. We're trying to develop electric cars as soon as possible. We're trying to promote solar energy as well. So in the field of energy, what kind of collaboration can we look at?
Let me first also add a little bit about your last question to Mr. Gopal Krishnan about the cyber security. So data is an important aspect of cyber security, certainly. The another aspect which is security of critical infrastructure or infrastructure in general, meaning anything which is integrated with cyber domain is vulnerable to going down. We have started a center in one of the IITs on looking at cyber or security of critical infrastructure, especially power and grids. That's an area in which there is more potential for collaboration with countries like Israel as well as others. We are also launching a new mission on cyber physical systems, which are basically intelligent machines of all kinds, both in services and manufacturing. So that's another area wherein there is good convergence with Israel. Now, talking about energy, in fact, one of the projects here, one of the 4 projects, is looking at more efficient pumps for agriculture, right? So it will increase efficiency from 40% to 65%. So basically, you save energy. There is a big nexus between energy and water as well. There is big nexus between, you talked about the sustainable development goals, right? So sustainable development goals, all of them are related to underlying technology. Part of it is related to policies and laws, but you cannot have policies unless you have technology that would make it possible for you to implement that policy. So if you look at all of these development goals, sustainable development goals, the technology really is the foundation. And energy is one of those sectors, clearly. Energy, while there are a whole lot of things, whether you look at the obvious things are solar energy. Solar is of 2 different types. So you have photovoltaics and you have thermal storage of solar energy. And both of them are very attractive areas to work in. But anyway, anytime you increase the efficiency of your machines, you are looking at energy savings and more sustainability.
Thanks, Professor Ashutosh. And Ambassador Kaman, when we are talking about our relationship, what would you like to tell young entrepreneurs? If there are young entrepreneurs in this audience, what would your advice be to them? What would you like to tell them about what Israel wants from this fund, from this relationship, and what kind of expertise is Israel really looking for?
What I would encourage young entrepreneurs in India is to know and to acknowledge the fact that somewhere on the west of India, looking towards the west, there is one small country, a democracy with values that are identical to the values of India, challenges that are similar, and solutions that can be found to be complementing solutions. We are 2 ancient nations, but we're young nations. We are very eager to prosper, to grasp the future, and we have found each other, despite the fact that we had thousands of years of relationship. The newly independent states of India and Israel, now 70 and 71 years old, have put innovation on the top of their agenda, and they've put innovation on the top of their joint agenda. And anyone who knows about this, what we call the table of relationship, the content of this relationship, as Professor Sharma has said, innovation and technology is in the crux of everything, and this is the benefit that we bring to each other, and there is a potential that cannot be imagined as we now speak. And 5 years from now, I'm sure that we'll be looking back at this conclave and other initiatives, and there are other initiatives too, and see the results of it in the commercial angle, and see the result of it in the strengthening of relations between two countries. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Kaman, you've really given us a new line. We've heard of political diplomacy, we've heard of defense diplomacy, economic diplomacy, and now we look at innovation diplomacy. That's very interesting. Mr. Gopalakrishnan.
Yeah. There's also something called development diplomacy.
Development diplomacy.
And agriculture and water together form something that we are proudly sharing with India, which is development diplomacy.
Development diplomacy. Mr. Gopalakrishnan.
Yeah, to the startups, I want to say that the fund, even though is actually between two governments, is managed as a venture fund, very similar to a venture fund. And so this is, I believe, very attractive to smaller companies, startups, and they must take advantage of the opportunity that's provided. Of course, you need to find a partner company on the Israeli side, and the office, Gita, and the Israeli Innovation Authority will help you actually identify the partner if you actually cannot find a partner by yourself. So take advantage of this because this is a great opportunity for you to get a new source of funding very similar to a venture fund.
Completely run out of time on this discussion, but we'd like to thank all our panelists for joining us, Mr. Sanjeev Varshney, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, Ambassador Kaman, and Professor Ashutosh Sharma. Thank you very much for being with us, taking out time, and also inspiring young entrepreneurs and giving us the vision of our leaders, Benjamin Netanyahu, Narendra Modi, as to what this relationship should look like in the next 5 years. Thank you very much to our audience as well.